Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Culinati. Since I started my channel 2 years ago, I have really wanted a good idea or an excuse to do a video about cookbooks. Now, I mostly talk about science fiction and fantasy and mainly fiction novels on this channel, but the books in my house that I use all the time, some of them on a daily basis, are cookbooks. I've decided that, kind of in the spirit of the season, I'm going to do a cookbook recommendation guide. Things that you can buy for yourself or for other people, but it's probably just gonna be cookbook reviews at the end of the day. A few of these cookbooks that I'm going to recommend are not ones that I have used a lot myself, or I haven't maybe used them at all. And that's because when I rated my parents' cookbook collection for some examples, they recommended some things to me, and so I have some of their suggestions as well as a few cookbooks that I have eaten food from, but I haven't prepared it myself because that would be my mom. So thank you to my parents for allowing me to walk out the door with a bunch of their cookbooks. I will bring them back as soon as I'm done filming this. The other thing I should mention up front is some of you guys probably know from my Q&A that I did recently that I am mostly vegan and I prefer to prepare my own food from vegan cookbooks. But my recommendations here are going to be for omnivores, for vegetarians, and for vegans. There's going to be a little bit of everything for everybody. I'm going to start with the honorable mentions. These are the two cookbooks that my parents recommended to me that I personally don't know that much about, but they say are good and they would recommend to people. My dad is a bread baker. He's been making bread for longer than I have been alive. This is why I cannot in good conscience usually buy bread from a store. It's gotta be homemade. So I asked my dad to recommend a bread baking book, and he pulled this off the shelf and said, Bread, a Baker's Book of Techniques and Recipes by Jeffrey Hammelman. He likes the technical type of cookbook, the thing that tells you the techniques and how to troubleshoot and how to do things in various ways, that has a lot of educational information, and this cookbook is one of those. You can probably tell from all the notes in it that he actually uses this quite a bit. So I am not good at baking bread. You would think that after spending years and years and years watching my dad make bread from scratch almost every week that I would know how to do it. I know the steps, okay? I know the basics of how to make bread. I'm just not good at it. So I should probably take my dad's advice and use this bread baking book to make bread. The other cookbook, which my mom pulled off the shelf and handed to me, was Every Grain of Rice, Simple Chinese Home Cooking by Fuchsia Dunlop. Fuchsia Dunlop, according to her bio in the back, was the first Westerner to train as a chef at a pretty prestigious culinary school in China. So this is supposed to be very authentic Chinese cooking, which I think is great. I had a few things from this cookbook because my mom has been making things from it recently. This is not vegetarian, not vegan, it's for omnivores. It has sections on meat and seafood and such, but it also has a section on tofu and a variety of vegetables, leafy greens, a whole section on mushrooms. I'm not a fan of mushrooms. It's also a very well put together layout. There are a lot of pictures. Looks like the recipes are easy to follow. And I suspect that if you or somebody you know is really interested in cooking from other cultures, ethnic cuisine or something like that, this is probably a cookbook that they haven't picked up and seen before, so it would be new to them. Next, I'm going to show you a couple of cookbooks by a duo. These cookbooks inspired the idea for this video because when I was thinking about cookbooks you would give to somebody, I thought you must give them these because they're beautiful, they're great to look at, they're great to use, and they're the kind of cookbook that most people wouldn't just buy for themselves because they're a bit big and they're a bit pricey, but they'd make an excellent gift for a real foodie friend. And these are cookbooks by Jeffrey Alford and Naomi Duguid. I have two of them here to show you. They're very big and very heavy, so it's gonna be a bit unwieldy. So the first one is Hot, Sour, Salty, Sweet, a culinary journey through Southeast Asia. Alford and Duguid used to be married, and they traveled by themselves and with their children through many areas of the world, including India and Asian countries, and they gathered a lot of recipes. They talked to a lot of people there. Alford took a lot of pictures, so these cookbooks are just chock full with gorgeous pictures of their travels and of the food. These are like coffee table cookbooks. You could just sit down and read through them, read the little mini essays, read the introductions to the recipes, and you'll learn something about the people, the culture, the geography, and a lot of the ingredients that they use from these Asian countries. This second one is called Mangoes and Curry Leaves, Culinary Travels Through the Great Subcontinent. So India. Much like the other one, there are lots and lots of beautiful pictures, little essays about their travels and the food and where they got the recipes. It's just, once again, really beautiful to look through. Alford and Duguid have quite a few other cookbooks. I think they have one or two others that are this size and shape, where it's a very rectangular and heavy, dense book. I think that the ones that look like this are just the ones that you can give as gifts because they're really, really pretty. The last omnivore cookbook I want to mention is How to Boil Water, Life Beyond Takeout. This is by the Food Network Kitchen, so I don't believe it has any individual authors, just contributors. This might seem like kind of an odd recommendation from me because, as you can tell from the title, this is the basics of cooking, like the kind of cookbook you give to your college-bound child and say, take this with you so you know how to cook. But that's why I'm recommending it, because it covers the basics. What are the components of a good smoothie? How do you make a hard-boiled egg? It's just how to prep and cut up vegetables, fruit, meat, how to saute things. It has lots of tips. The layout of this book is very fun. It has lots of pictures and diagrams and illustrations. I think the recipes themselves are very carefully broken down. They're not complex. They're explained very simply and approachably. So I think this is just an excellent thing to give to somebody who is a bit tentative about cooking and would appreciate the basics. If you are somebody that you know is interested in vegetarian cooking, I have the classic recommendation for you, and that is Vegetarian Cooking for Everyone by Deborah and Madison. This is the newest edition. It's really, really gorgeous. It's a beautiful book. I'll put a picture up here of the cover of the other editions, which are much more recognizable. That cookbook's been around since the 90s, I think. This is seriously a classic vegetarian cookbook, and you may have even heard of it. Deborah Madison, to the rescue whenever you need a recipe centered around a specific type of vegetable. I don't use this cookbook all the time, but I reach for it when I have a vegetable and I need a recipe to use it all up. If I have a lot of eggplant, flip to the eggplant section and find the recipe for baba ganoush or something like that. It doesn't have pictures in it. That's the only sad thing. I wish that it had pictures in this. I think the other editions have an insert, but it's a lot of text. It's a lot of great information. All of it is organized around sections for vegetables. Like this is the artichoke section. So there's an introduction on each type of vegetable, basically how you cook them. This is another cookbook that I think is very approachable. It has a lot of information in it, so maybe it's a little bit overwhelming sometimes, but I don't think it's trying to be gourmet fancy food. It's also not trying to be your casual everyday food. It's just, how do you make these things? Now on to my favorite section, the vegan cookbooks. I'm a huge fan of Chandra Moskowitz's cookbooks. I'll just say that I recommend them all, except for Appetite for Reduction, which I have never gotten into. I'm going to talk about two of her cookbooks in detail. The first one, which is just my go-to recommendation, is Vegan with a Vengeance. This is her first cookbook. It was published in 2005, and it is the reason that I got into vegan cooking and baking. As her first cookbook, it's a little more complicated than it needs to be. You can really tell that over the years she's learned to streamline recipes, to pare down ingredient lists, and her instructions are less convoluted today. But there is an attitude in Vegan with a Vengeance, which I think is just summed up by the cover of the original edition. I have 2 copies of this cookbook actually. This is the original cover, and I also have the 10th anniversary edition. So if you're giving this as a gift, I would recommend the new edition because instead of just having the insert of pictures in the middle, it has a lot more colors inside, has a lot more pictures, which is good if you're making something you want to know what the end result is supposed to look like. But this is the cookbook with attitude. It has that real DIY Brooklyn girl vibe to it. Some of these recipes are dead simple, and some of them are pretty elaborate vegan versions of food that you just probably wouldn't think about making them vegan. But all of it is infused with this enthusiasm for food and this attitude that you can do it. You can make this stuff in a small kitchen and a big kitchen, and it's gonna be fun and a lot easier than you think it would be. The other cookbook by Chandra and Moskowitz that I have to recommend is Vegan Brunch. It's a lot of breakfast and brunch style food, but I'm not gonna lie, I make this stuff for dinner all the time because it's really easy. There are a lot of baked goods from this, a lot of muffins and waffle recipes that I really love and I make all the time. I am the muffinista, so I have to talk about the muffin recipes. But basically, this is just all around a lot of solid kind of comfort food. There are a couple of more unusual things in here, but if you're looking for a couple of pancake recipes, the scones, the muffins, stuff like that, this is the one to get. There are not a lot of pictures in this one, sadly, but it is still a very appealing cookbook and very easy to follow everything. This is one of my favorite recipes. It's the polenta rancheros, which is just total comfort food. I literally made my meals from this every day for a couple of years until I moved on to other cookbooks, so it's possible to survive on just this cookbook, in my opinion. My final cookbook recommendation is Vegan Yum Yum by Lauren Ulm. Ulm had a vegan blog for a while. I think it's defunct now. I don't think she's active in the vegan community anymore, but I love this cookbook. And in fact, I'm making dinner from it tonight. This is another one that I've made a large number of recipes from it. And the reason that I'm so drawn to this is that unlike a lot of these other cookbooks I've just talked about, the recipe sizes are for 2 to 3 people rather than 4 to 6. I'm a single person, and while I like having leftovers, I don't like being drowned in wasteful leftovers. So it's nice to pull this off the shelf and make something that's just gonna be like 2 meals worth, and I don't feel like I'm wasting a lot of things. I also have to recommend this because it has pictures for every single recipe. Like seriously, that is so fantastic. I don't think I own any other cookbook that truly has a picture for every single recipe, and it's such a good guide. One of the things that I've noticed about this cookbook that I really like is that Ulm seems particularly good at creating sauces and just getting the blend of flavors right. I particularly am terrible at making sauces, so it's really great that I can make these recipes. They're very easy to follow and it works every time. I mean, to give you an example, she has a vegan Worcestershire sauce in this. I didn't even know you can make that vegan. So those are a whole bunch of cookbook recommendations from me and from my parents. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments. And if you have any recommendations of cookbooks that you really love and that you use all the time, please also let me and other people know. I, for one, am always looking for new, really solid vegan cookbooks that I should look up and perhaps get for my own collection. I feel like I've finally gotten the cookbooks out of my system. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be back to talk to you again, probably about fiction next time. And until then, bye.